Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daisy, and I wasn't prepared to speak anything. This is an impromptu thing. And of course, I thank the Lord for every moment. And can I introduce my son, AMULYA Parmar. AMULYA, please come on the stage. This is a very special moment for me because he was a child who was homeschooled, who not only excelled in studies, but I would always tell him study. And he would, of course, be in the top 6% in the nation, but he was a boy who was always driven for his passion. So I take great pride to introduce the new impact maker, the change maker, as he calls him, the young entrepreneur with Sky's the Limit, AMULYA Parmar.
Thanks, Mom. Okay, guys, it's a pleasure to be here today. I just want to first and foremost thank some of you for coming out here. Time is such an underrated word, but it's becoming all the more powerful. I want to take just a second thank a few people here. And first, I want to thank Tapan Kataria for taking the time to invite me here to this event. I also want to thank President Tel for this opportunity. But moreover, I want to thank each one of you for taking a few minutes to lend your ears, and the people who in the past few minutes who spoke and took time to craft something special to share with you guys. See, I'm not sure if you caught a common theme here, but time is becoming all the more important. But before I talk about the importance of a single word, I want to first have a conversation on words. A conversation that started 5 years ago and 5 minutes from here in Detroit. Actually, 5 years ago, I was standing on a different stage and my mom was sitting in a different audience when I was competing for the National Script Spelling Bee. And I remember studying thousands of hours, or at least what seemed like, and studying tens of thousands of words. But for me, what really made the experience more formative was the idea that I could write my own words. And I first discovered that by accident. Now I know what this word means. It actually means looking forward. But in the National Script Spelling Bee, this means a mistake. And the thing I learned is I took this mistake, I recreated it as a lifestyle, because I now live my life defining my own word, defining my own life. I define myself as an impactpreneur, someone who seeks to scale impact. I take solutions and I maximize them. And don't just look at the problems first, because I believe an unmaximized solution sometimes is as worse as an unsolved problem. See, I don't want to define myself by the typical bounds of a youth entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur, because I believe those bounds are predefined and they can limit us all. I want to tell you more about my story and what defines an impactpreneur, and you can decide. So my story starts, I can remember this almost as if it was yesterday, really with idea notebooks. And I filled my book with ideas, idea after idea and after idea. And one idea particularly stood out in my mind was the idea of, what if I could bring 3 unspoken languages, but 3 universal ones, the art of coding, marketing, and investing, to everyone. You see, growing up I was homeschooled, and that meant school went with me no matter wherever I went. And something I realized very quickly in that journey is, a lot of people don't have the ability to customize their own education, but more importantly, a lot of people don't have the ability or resources to reach this form of education we call skill learning and skill developing. So one thing I chose to democratize was these resources for coding, marketing, investing in a multilingual platform called Third World Tutors. But the problem is, when you're starting something like this, you need 2 things. You need money and server space, both which I had neither. So what I did was I took some $100 of birthday money and I invested that into my first server, a web server. I remember saving just as much as I could to start my first website, and I resold everything else for $210. And I would do this a month after month after month. And eventually, it started growing to the extent that at one point, I was hosting other people's websites in addition to third world tutors, and I was making some extra change. But what stood on my mind most was, shoot, I was actually making an impact. I was making an impact in a different perspective, from a monetary perspective. And eventually I started just sharing some of the web hosting for free. And that's where Host Your Voice started. 1.5 years ago, I started a free hosting web scholarship, where we provide resources for web hosting and web design to get a voice out there and connect you to journalists, bloggers, etc., all for free, so we can help you scale impact for good. I operate on a very simple philosophy. Someone who wants to do good shouldn't pay to have an impact. And Host Your Voice, over the past few months, has done something awesome. Not just for me or my team, for the people we've been able to impact. Third World Tutors today is in over 30 plus countries. A few months ago, I'm very excited to say we were invited to the United Nations, Host Your Voice, and a once blind change maker from Host Your Voice. And the stories we were able to tell range from running an international photo campaign featured on Huffington Post for International Women's Day, to right now working on an app to help people with speech impediments actually create and craft their story and be able to share it. We're working on another thing for speech disorders and eating disorders, and working with Amazon and their Amazon Alexa program to help them drive this connection and this ephemeral connection we all have to food and daily lifestyle. But the question is this a matter of that $100 investment? And I joke about this a lot, because if I didn't have that $100, maybe none of this would have been possible. But one thing I quickly realized, it was never a matter of the $100. The real investment was having the will to share resources. I'm going to say this one more time. The will to share resources. And that's what changed my whole mindset. Because the will to share resources actually translate into, when you share resource, you become the resource. You see, something I had to realize very early on, and a problem I had to figure out, is how can I best provide value? Because we ask and we run into this question over and over, whether it's this another email you send, a business conference, a meeting, you have to provide the other person a value. And I quickly realized, when I share resources, I become the value. Sometimes even more value than the resource itself is. But now the question comes, what are the currencies or resources that you have to share? And I've narrowed down to 3. Tell me what you think. Time, money, and energy. But there's a problem. You see, depending where you are in life, you can only choose 2. Certain times in your life you'll have time and money. Other times you'll have time and energy. And other times you might have money and energy. But remember, the condition, you can only choose 2. But here's the problem with that. There's only one small problem. And I want to tell you this is so much of a problem. And that Detroit, well, it breaks the rule. It breaks that rule because Detroit has all 3. And in particular, the one I want to focus on today is the way I started this presentation. And that time is a differentiating factor for Detroit. See, one thing I always thought was time was the wisdom gained, right? It was the experiences that you had in life. It was the different decisions you made and the consequences and the results. But time in Detroit means something different. Time means you're willing to set your time apart for someone else or something else. You see, change comes in all forms. There's activism today. People are raising GoFundMe crowd raisers. There's apps developed. There's so many moments that were created that form change. And you know, ideas, well, they come in all sizes. At one point, we had to send a man to the Mars. At another point, Henry Ford jotted down here in Detroit the blueprint for an assembly line. And at other points, someone invented curly fries. But time, my friends, only comes from one place. It comes from the heart. My plea to all of you is let's make just some time for one another. Let's make time to help change something. Let's set apart that time, Detroit. I'm going to come back to this in a few seconds, but before I close, I want to tell you something and share something that my mentor always taught me. He said, always start any conversation and any presentation on a good note and end on a good note too. So that even if you mess up the entire presentation, you're guaranteed to have a good ending. I kind of inherit that through a video because I can't stop or end on something I can't mess up. But before I show you the video, I want to ask you guys one thing, or think about one thing. I want to think about the story of a few rebels, and maybe the greatest rebel of them all. Thank you so much.